Welcome back to Following Know It On, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 37, and we're doing chapters 50 through 54 of Words of Radiance. We have 5 chapters again this week. For the third week in a row, actually, we have 5 chapters. And we have not 1, not 2, but 3 Adolin point of view chapters to do this week. Eliot, how are you feeling about this week?
Feeling good. It's definitely been a lot of reading lately, but a lot of really good stuff. I feel like Words of Radiance is really getting into its stride here. So it's been cool stuff. It's been worth the extra work.
Paul, how about you?
I can definitely agree. These were some really fun chapters. We got to see a lot of interesting stuff, so I can agree. I feel like we've kind of gotten past the low middle of the book hump almost, where it's slowing down. So I really enjoyed these.
Okay. Do you, Paul, have 2 words to summarize these 5 chapters?
No, I'm kidding. I have 2. My 2 words for this week were discovery and vengeance.
Discovery and vengeance. Okay. Eliot, how about you?
Mine for these chapters are sneaking and revealing.
Sneaking and revealing. Okay, cool. Let's discuss these words. All right, Paul. Let's start with vengeance, if you would. What does vengeance mean?
Of course. So there's a few things of vengeance here. One of which I feel like there's a lot of vengeance with Eshonai and Adolin. There's a lot of kind of confusion there, and we as the reader know that there's a lot more going on. But Eshonai saying that the only way to end this is if you kill all of us and all this stuff. It's a little abrasive, I would say.
Right.
And then also with Adolin's duel later on, I feel like there's a lot of bad blood kind of going on, and people get upset, and the guy who duels feels he's been cheated again, all that stuff. So that's super fun. It even relates to Shallan, I would say, not in a full-fledged sense, but she sees some things that she probably wants vengeance for. So
yes, we will talk about that later.
we will.
All right, Eliot. Oh, wait. We have another word for you, Paul. What's the other one?
Mm-hmm. My other word is discovery, largely for the moment with Shallan, our Shallan time there. That was the big reason.
Kaladin's got some big discovery about himself.
He does. Yes, that's right. I'm glad you reminded me of that, because that's actually initially why I chose the word, but I just forgot it now. But yes, Kaladin starts discovering some more of his search binding abilities, and he really starts to experiment and train with that. So some good self-discovery, I guess.
All right, cool. Eliot.
So I'll talk about revealing first, because I picked it for pretty much all the same reasons Paul picked discovery. Pretty much, yeah, that bit with Shallan and Amaram, and then Kaladin kind of maybe revealing a little bit more about what he can do. Kind of chapter 52 is a really interesting chapter. We'll talk about it here, but it's very different than a lot of chapters we've read before. So interesting read there. And then sneaking, I have to say the word sneaking in Smeagol's voice every time, because he says that word. Sneaking.
I was thinking the same thing.
Sneaking, because there's a lot of sneaking going on in this chapter. Shallan is sneaking around Amaram's house. She's hiding inside of boulders. She's doing all kinds of stuff. And then we've got other characters that are doing a little bit of sneaking too. I mean, Moash is still kind of sneaking around right now. We don't really know where he's at. Kaladin's even really sneaking around. He's going out into the plateaus to do his discovery bit. So everyone's sneaking around, and we're revealing some important information.
While we're on the Lord of the Rings references, there's the scene where Shallan paints a rock over herself just makes me think of that scene in the Two Towers, where
The cloaks.
where Frodo just like puts his cloak over himself.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's in the theatrical edition, but
it is.
is it? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So, Adolin, chapter 50 and chapter 51. Adolin is on a high right after his date with Shallan. He feels like it's going well, and he's in this bunker that they're hiding from the high storm from last week. And Eliot is there. He hasn't dueled him yet. That's coming later in the episode. But they have like kind of a clash in the bunker there. They're not the best of friends, and they're definitely rivals. Looking forward to their duel. And Sadeas is also there. And so there's an interesting conversation between Sadeas and Adolin. Anyone want to pick this scene up? Anyone get stuff from this chapter?
So you could say that there's a little bit of vengeance going on here.
Sure.
If I can't drop one of my words in there. I think this was interesting. So Sadeas and Adolin talk a little bit, and Adolin is very upfront and forward about how he's unhappy about what Sadeas is trying to do around there, and Sadeas is coming from the point that I'm the only person trying to do the right thing at this point, or save a part of Alethkar. And with that, he also says, which I thought was interesting, he talks about how much he cared for Dalinar and
Gavilar.
yes, and stuff. But he says that they're both dead now. That the Blackthorn is gone, and obviously Gavilar died, and things like that. But I guess it made me a little curious as to how different current Dalinar is from the Blackthorn. They always allude to it. They always talk about it, but Sadeas says it as they're like it's just not even the same person, not even remotely. And then Adolin just tells him straight up that he hates him. So, yeah.
I also picked up in this segment here that Sadeas talks about how he's renounced his High Prince of Information title, which I thought was perhaps important. He's taking a step there in rejecting the rule of Elokar, basically of kind of taking a step away from the rules. And I think that does take maybe a card out of Dalinar's deck, in that they're gonna have a harder time kind of making him have to stick by the rules if shun some of them. So not only is he provoking Adolin here, he's also revealing that he's renounced that title.
Can't hold Sadeas to a honor code if he's just not even playing by the rules. So,
right. But yeah, part of you just wants Adolin to just take him out right there, then and there. But yeah, I suppose that would not go down so well for Adolin.
Let's think about it.
I was going to say, he even considers it right there on the spot. He tells himself, well, I could kill him right now. What's the worst that would happen? I get executed? might be worth it. Adolin does not like I would even say Adolin dislikes Sadeas more than Dalinar does. And Dalinar took the betrayal really personal, but Adolin has the emotion behind it. He's very impassioned about this. He wants to kill Sadeas. He genuinely does want to kill Sadeas. And Dalinar, maybe that's what Dalinar wants as well, but he would only do that if it improves, if it builds the kingdom up. He would approach it from a more level-headed position than Adolin does right now.
Dalinar is definitely more logic, and Adolin is definitely more emotion. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
once Sadius and Adolin are done with their little dispute, conversation, whatever you want to call it, Adolin goes back to his war camp and finds Dalinar's guards, like, looking at, well, Bridge 4 guards, looking at a bunch of writing on the floor. And it's pretty obvious now that Dalinar is writing this himself. It's from his own knife, and Dalinar was the only one there. So Dalinar, during his visions, is writing cryptic messages on the floor. Do we have any more thoughts about this? We've seen this before.
We have seen this before, but I don't think we got a chance to talk about it the last time we saw these numbers. But I was actually reconsidering my position the last time we saw these numbers appear, because I think the last time we saw these were when Zeth appeared, and they all, they try to escape. They all run down the passage. Zeth comes, fight, whatever. They come back, and then they see that there's letters scratched on the door or on the wall or something like that. I kind of took that scene as more of a, but wait, Dalinar was out with everyone fighting Zeth, so it couldn't have been him that scratched it. So this is maybe bringing it back to definitive proof that it was Dalinar, I guess. I was more convinced before we saw those letters with the Zeth chapter, but yeah, I'm pretty convinced it's Dalinar doing the scratching at this point.
Dalinar assumes that it's him, so
yeah,
doing the sneaking.
Yes,
sneaking.
There's a quick mention of Shen at the end of this chapter. Adolin notices that there's a parchment in amongst Bridge 4, and he's armed, and he brings it up to Dalinar, and Dalinar says, "Oh yeah, I did that as an experiment." Did either of you catch this?
I did. I'll be honest. I didn't quite catch all the stuff with Dalinar being our notorious scratcher, but I did notice this like right off the bat, and I was really curious to see what happened. And I thought it was kind of cool, but also, I don't know. It didn't seem quite like Dalinar, because he was basically saying that, like, Adolin asks, "Why would you give a parchment weapon?" And he was just like, "I wanted to see what would happen. Like, I'm curious what's gonna happen, and stuff." And I don't know what to make of that entirely. I don't know if it's like an error or like, probably not, but it didn't seem quite like Dalinar, but at the same time it did. Nothing super special on that, but I did definitely think about that for a while.
I kind of passed over this a little bit. I noticed it when they brought it up. It didn't seem too important here in this moment. I mean, I think it's good that Adolin is noticing this, and that they're, keying in on how is this going to go. We've just given a parchment more freedom than a parchment maybe has ever had before, or has ever had in 100 years or something like that. So having their attention on a parchment is good, based on what we know and what Shallan knows about what she's going to try and communicate to them. So this is probably a good thing for them. But yeah, all right. We've been watching Shen for a while now, waiting to see what's going to happen with him. So now Adolin and Dalinar are maybe a little more keyed into that now.
Speaking of Parshendi, Voidbringers, whatever you want to call them, we have a chapter 51 where Adolin and Eshonai's meeting doesn't go totally to plan, and by totally to plan I mean at all. Eshonai is not interested in peace anymore. They made this this meeting with the Alethi, and then Eshonai achieved storm form, and we're assuming that's why they are no longer interested in peace.
This
This chapter honestly makes me sad. They've been at war for what, like 6 years now?
Yeah.
6 years of war between these two people, and they could have had peace. They finally are getting to talk, and they had a chance at peace. And we know that Eshonai wanted to talk peace. She was ready to talk about finding a peaceful end to this, and yet here we have the new Eshonai who's taken over by Stormform, who's just so blatantly opposed to any kind of peace, and basically just says, over our dead bodies, pretty much is how she says it. Like this, I had to pause for a second. Like this is this is really sad for me that they could have had peace, and I feel like we're heading to the exact opposite of that. I feel like we're headed towards devastating destruction.
They were like a week away from actually establishing something, and a week too late.
Yeah, my first thought with this was, yeah, it's incredibly sad. Like I definitely agree with Elliot there. Um, I could picture this really well in like a movie or show setting as well. Um, it's just like you're yelling at your TV. Like, why couldn't it have been like a way different? Like, um, and stuff. So it's kind of frustrating almost because we, as the reader, obviously know that Ash and I wanted to resolve this, and then it finally, like, they get a meeting set up, and then she goes, and it does not go well. I do have to say though, with this, I'm really happy kind of with how Adolin was at it. Like it specifies that so Ash Knight comes in and basically says, I don't care about a peace treaty. Excuse me. I don't care about a peace treaty. You're gonna have to kill us, or we're gonna kill you. Like this is gonna end in violence. Um, and then Adolin, he at least like doesn't just get hot headed and let it stop there. He stops and is like, "Wait, why? Please explain." Like he didn't squander that moment, and I was very happy about that. Um, but that was about the only good thing that come from it, unfortunately.
And interestingly, the answer to that question that he gets is actually a little bit of information for us, I think. He stops her as she's trying to leave, and he says, why this whole war, why are you doing what you're doing? And she gives him a bit of an answer. Actually, she says that Gavilar should never have revealed his plans to them that night, and kind of leaving the implication there that Gavilar apparently told the Parshendi something. He was planning to do something, and they killed him for it. And I think it even mentions the return of our gods or something like that. And so, as usual, this leads into more questions, of course, though, of what was Gavilar planning? What was he doing? And how is it tied to the return of the Parshendi gods, who we've kind of picked up by now? We know that they fear their gods, or they're driven to try and make sure their gods don't turn their attention to them. So Gavilar was obviously going to do something that was going to bring that attention on them, either intentionally or unintentionally. I feel like this is another small piece towards figuring out that puzzle.
This specific puzzle is really funny to me because each prologue of each book is the night Gavilar died from a different point of view. And so you get a little bit more each book, and then you kind of just get left left to wonder the entire book with more hints. But that one specifically is funny to me.
This is a side note. You mentioned about how the prologue every time it's kind of that same night from a different perspective. Just realized that from Yasa's perspective, she died shortly after, and I'm really hoping that's not going to be a recurring theme. Like, we're going to see their perspective, and then whoever's perspective we saw is just going to die. That'd be kind of sad. But anyways, moving on.
Are you saying you are afraid for Zeth? Because we've seen Zeth's perspective of that night.
I guess that already ruins my my idea. So Zeth is the exception, right? If there's anything we've learned about Zeth, he's kind of an exception.
True.
So we'll see.
True. Before we move on, I do want to highlight the beginning maybe of this chapter, where Adolin stands up to Dalinar. Dalinar wants to go out on this plateau himself, and he says, no, I need to be doing this. It's my peace treaty, whatever. And Adolin shoots right back at him and says, no, father, you're too important for this. The Parshendi might have some weird plan involving Zeth here, because that's been a trend lately. So you're going to stay here and I'm going to go out. And I think it's a really nice highlight for where Adolin is now and where he was when we met him, like at halfway through the Wave Kings. So he definitely stands up to his father when he feels it's important. And yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
It is another cool Adolin moment. I actually agree with you there that not so much that he's like standing up to his father or arguing or pushing back against him, but more so just that he's moving in a direction. Like the Adolin we first met was passionate, but maybe didn't quite care so much. Now Adolin seems to care more. He seems
Right.
to be more invested in what's going on here, such to the point where he's now standing up and being like, no, Dad, you're not going out there. You're much more valuable than I am towards our cause. Like, I feel like the Adolin we first met but probably wouldn't have cared about the cause quite so much. So he's changed.
You guys ready for chapter 52? There's a lot to unpack in this chapter.
Definitely.
Barely.
So Kaladin's flying around and Shallan is sneaking around. Who do we want to talk about first?
Well, first of all, I want to talk about how different just the format of this chapter is than any other chapter we've read, I think, in Way of Kings or Words of Radiance up to this point. We've had chapters that have switched perspective in the middle of a chapter. I think we've even had chapters that have done it more than once. This chapter, though, at least in my copy, switches pretty much every page. You get one page of Kaladin and then one page of Shallan and then one page of Kaladin and one page of Shallan. And it kind of threw me at first, actually, jumping from the two of them, especially just because I actually cared more about the Shallan chapter than I did the Kaladin chapters. It was like, wait, no, don't tell me about Kaladin. He's zipping around and flying around. Great. Get back to Shallan. I want to know what she's going to find there. But I think about halfway through, I appreciated it. The pacing of this chapter was really intriguing and gripping. You wanted to know what each person, Kaladin and Shallan, was discovering in that moment, to steal your word, Paul. So it was an adrenaline packed chapter from start to finish.
It was. I don't know if it's just because we're getting further through this story and I'm kind of understanding the people and the places and stuff more, but I feel like a lot of these chapters I can picture in my head really like vividly, or at least a lot better than before, and I picture it as, I guess, like a movie or a show. And I feel like this was really cool, and the imagery. I'm having a hard time saying words tonight, I guess. The imagery is cool. Like with Kaladin like actually flying around and
Right.
talking about him running on the wind and stuff, like that's just super cool. And I just like pictured that as like a super cool like movie moment, but also pitted against like the dramatic really dramatic stuff going on with Shallan. I agree that in this chapter I was much more like, all right, let's see what happens with Shallan, because she's kind of Kaladin's kind of just zooming around. She's like in a dangerous like she's like really making a big risk doing what she's doing and stuff. Like it has you on the edge of your seat, kind of. So I was really invested, and she did a good job, of kind of disguising herself, sneaking around. I was pretty worried that she was gonna get called out, like you're not the real whoever or whatever, but
Right.
she did pretty good.
Let's talk about Shallan. She hides as a messenger boy, walks in, hides as a nurse. No, sorry.
Maid.
Thank you. Maid, that's the word I was looking for. Walks up the stairs, talks to Amaram, walks back down the stairs. Does she hide as Amaram?
So she like hides as the maid, but then eventually goes back into the map room, comes out as Amaram,
Right.
Mhm.
and then I think ultimately ends up as again. So yeah, like 4 or 5 changes in there.
So, like, plot development aside, we're getting some cool discoveries of what Shallan can and can't do with her things, with her powers, and turns out she can do quite a bit. She can change on the fly. She can pretend, sort of, to be different people. She doesn't have, like, voice down, but yeah.
I noticed too that she can now like draw a picture in the morning, study that picture, and then later that day she can still create that image around herself. And I think she even thinks through kind of the process there of if she goes longer than a day, it doesn't work. Like her brain can't quite remember it perfectly enough to create the right illusion. But that's pretty useful, right? If she kind of like preps her spells, if you will, in the morning, perhaps, it gets them all ready, and then she could cast them anytime through the day to compare it to like a D&D reference. But interesting way that's working for her, and she uses it quite effectively here in this chapter.
Skipping ahead a little bit she does so well here to the point where the Ghostbloods who are watching the house, they don't even realize that she's made it into the room and out and they've been watching the entire time. So they assume she's failed, but no, she's done so well that they had no idea that she was successful. All right. Let's address it. When she comes out, talks to Amaram. Amaram gets a little glassy-eyed and summons his blade, and Shallan stops listening and stares at the blade. Why, Eliot?
I called it because it's Helleran's blade, which means that Amaram took Helleran's blade from Kaladin, who took it from most likely Helleran, which means Kaladin, the Shardbearer that he killed, was most likely
Shallan's older
brother Helleran, which, man, the
Huge.
implications of that make me stop and have to think for a little bit. But yeah, I had a hunch on this one when this first came up, and I went back to the Way of Kings and saw that in that section where Amaram is talking about that Shardbearer, he mentions Ghostbloods. In that moment, I just knew it. I was like, oh, that had to be Helleran, and it was. So this is big. This is super big.
So now Shallan thinks that Amaram killed her brother, but really Kaladin killed her brother.
And I didn't even think about that when I was kind of my theory together. I didn't even realize that in this moment, Shallan jumps to the wrong conclusion, right? She logically assumes that Amaram killed her brother. So now she's got this whole vengeance thing stewing inside of her. I'm stealing all your words tonight, Paul. You had some good ones, apparently.
Thanks.
She's now going to be building up this, revenge plot or whatever against Amaram when Amaram's not the one who killed her brother. It was Kaladin. So, oh man.
Defending Amaram. Just wanted to
Right.
highlight that again. All right, Paul. Elliot's completely right. What are your thoughts?
I mean, my thought while reading it, I really thought Shallan was gonna like almost outlash or like do something then or get caught or something.
Right.
Or at least that's what I was very afraid of. My biggest thought is, how is she going to do whenever she actually goes to Shallan and like draws it and talks to him about it and stuff? She has time to, I guess, like mentally prepare, so it'll be fine. But I'm really curious for that to happen. As far as thoughts with Halloran, I kind of knew it was coming. Well, mostly thanks to Elliot's like theory and stuff from before. We had talked about this a few times, and so definitely like was expecting it to happen. Like as soon as the situation was kind of described, I was like, he's gonna pull the Shardblade, and Shallan's gonna have a cow. So,
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, I really liked that. That was kind of the big like moment, like
When
it's crazy.
when I was reading these chapters this week, I forgot that this was in here. I forgot that we get this reveal this early. And so when I read it, I was like, oh, I guess we're talking about this week. So time to put that on the outline.
Going back just a smidgen, though, I feel like almost just as important as that big reveal right there is what Shallan actually finds in Amaram's house. She finds the maps, right? And
Right.
she learns that Amaram is somehow involved with Voidbringers and something much larger. He's got like notes that talk about reaching the center before the Alethi armies and notes on the Parshendi and some really intriguing stuff that really makes me wonder, one, what is Amaram up to? And two, who is Amaram working with? Because it's clearly not the Ghostbloods, because they're out to get him
Right.
or steal his info. He's clearly not working with Dalinar and Navani and everyone we know. It doesn't seem like he's working with Sadeas. Sadeas seems to be much more focused on just the war camps and the politics all there and getting his power there. So is Amaram like working with himself? Does he have his own agenda that he's working here, or is there another organization that we don't know about yet that's involved in all this? I have lots of questions here, and I feel like what Shallan has just discovered is just as important, if not maybe more so, the fact that she's just discovered he has her brother's old blade.
I'm hoping we find something out about that whenever Shallan goes and
Oh yeah.
kind of hears the story. I don't know if we will, but yeah, I'm really curious because I feel like Amaram is one of our biggest enigmas right now, besides like Hoyd, Zeth, like obvious huge ones, but other than like normal characters, I guess, we don't know what Amaram wants. We kind of know what Sadeas wants, sort of, and we know what obviously Dalinar and them want, but yeah, I'm really curious because there's no way he's got to be up to no good, like
Right. He has been presented to us as up until this point as one of our biggest antagonists, right? Kaladin hates him, we hate him, Shallan now hates him, but for the wrong reasons. And he is tied to the Voidbringers, tied to the Alethi armies here somehow, and we don't know yet. So something's happening.
Something indeed.
Kaladin's side of this chapter, he's flying around, still's really happy that he's finally flying, and they have an interesting talk. They always have interesting talks, but this one's interesting because they mention Shardblades, they mention Zeth, they mention something else, but I don't remember. Does somebody want to talk about this for a little bit?
Can I actually open us with reading a little section here, because
Sure.
again, we get another little tidbit here, another piece of the puzzle that I feel like is pretty important. And we've kind of theorized on this before, but this is starting to nail it down for me. So Kaladin and Syl, they're having the conversation. They're talking about Zeth. You don't think he has a spren, Kaladin said, but how does he do what he does? The weapon, Syl said, more confidently than she had before. It's something special. It was created to give abilities to men, much as our bond does. I feel like this has been hinted at before, but this is pretty clear right here. Syl seems confident here, and she's clearly saying he doesn't have a spren. He gets his power from his weapon. Powers just like our bond that we have between spren and Surgebinder give you powers. So this seems to definitively point to the fact for me that Zeth is some kind of anomaly. He's some kind of different shard bearer, different Surgebinder than like the Knights Radiant. At least that's where I'm pretty heavily leaning now, that he's kind of a little bit outside that, Venn diagram a bit. I don't know what you thought about that, Paul, if you keyed in on that at all.
I did. And honor blades are still these, like, I don't know. It's the piece of the puzzle I feel like we know the least about, even though it has been mentioned several times. We get the gist of what they do, but I want to know why they do it, or like how they do it.
Right.
Like, surely these honor blades had to be like made by something, right? Or like come from somewhere, and I don't know what that is. There's got to be a lot more to it than that, because if not, then these honor blades seem a little overpowered, you know.
Yeah, I'm super curious too, and I don't know that we can definitively say too that it's an honor blade, but that seems like the logical step, right? Because we know
Mhm.
that honor blade and Surgebinder are related. We've heard them mentioned in conversations before, so it seems pretty logical that if Zeth has Surgebinder type abilities, but not a spren like a classical Surgebinder, then honor blade seems like the obvious choice. But yeah, what is an honor blade? Where do they come from? What are their limitations and rules and laws? Yeah, I want to know all of that too.
And this is somewhat tied to this. Syl's dislike for shard blades. And they have a conversation about this as well, of Kaladin's trying to figure that out with Syl, and Syl's can't really answer, but she gives him a little bit. And Kaladin's saying, so it's the people who hold them that's the problem. And she's like, well, no, but that's also the problem. And Kaladin says, well, if I had a new shard blade, can you make new shard blades? Is that fine? And she's like, yeah. So
Yeah, of course. Just go get one from the Shardblade
Sure.
store.
right.
You know? One thing I thought was interesting also, I'm pretty sure it was in this chapter while they're talking about Zeth. Doesn't Syl say, like, that they mention he doesn't have a spren, but doesn't Kaladin questions that, and Syl's like, well, he doesn't have like a good kind of spren or something, or a spren that I would like or consider to be a spren or something. So isn't it kind of implied that Seth probably does have a spren still, but it's just one Syl brushes off or doesn't care for or doesn't want to talk about? That was my guess, at least.
I think that could still be on the table. I think some of those implications you're thinking of might have been one of the previous discussions that Kaladin and Syl had. I don't remember if it's this
Maybe
discussion or
so.
that one, but I don't think we've ruled that out at this point. I think that maybe he does have some sort of a type of bond that's just completely different than what like Kaladin and Syl have. It's a completely different type of spren. I think that still might be possible.
One of the what you do, or what Sill's confident of, I should say, right now is that Zeth is not getting his powers from a spren like Kaladin is getting his powers from a spren. So Zeth still might have a spren, that's just not where his powers are coming from. He has a sword that does that for him.
I see.
And the idea that you were talking about, Trevor, of like forging a new Shardblade, that perked my ears up as soon as I saw that, heard that. That was like, oh wow, tell me more about that. That sounds awesome. Forging your own Shardblade, like where do you have to go to do that? Mount Doom, I'm assuming.
The
since we're
Shardblade
referencing
story.
all the Lord of the Rings things tonight.
Yeah, this is. I'll throw in Star Wars. This is the cryptic Jedi. You have to go forge your own lightsaber thing, and how do you do that? Well, I don't know. Just go do it.
But wouldn't that be cool if Kaladin were to go on some kind of like journey to forge his own Shardblade and, you know, create it with, you know, part of his personality in it and something like that? That'd be a cool plot line for him.
There would be. I was happy to see that because it did also show that Kaladin would use a Shardblade if there wasn't, I guess, the negative thoughts behind it with that he feels towards the Knights Radiant. Because I've always been like a little bit frustrated with how he's just like, no Shardblades, not touching it, not going there.
Right.
But he's saying, if there was a new Shardblade that I guess didn't have the like aspect of like the Knights Radiant betrayal or surrender, I guess, behind it, that he would. And so I'm hoping for that.
And then Kaladin comes back and talks to Shen for a brief conversation.
Or Relane, apparently,
Relane.
is his name.
Which, okay, side note, this is kind of funny to me because I accidentally called him Relane on the podcast once, and neither of you like acknowledged it, and so I didn't bring it up again. But I definitely accidentally said Relane instead of Shen once, and I noticed it, and somebody in our comments section noticed it, but you guys did not. So we were fine.
Know. I was probably like, oh, that's some character I should know about, but didn't pay enough attention, But that's funny.
Yeah, that's been one of my slips lately. Is I accidentally called him Relane, and both of you were like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Relane, I totally missed it. Totally missed it.
Oh man, I thought this was cool though. Well, not cool. Interesting. Makes me very nervous because Shen leaves and he won't say why, and the whole conversation we've had about Shen so far is he a Parshendi spy? And this is like he's just like, I think I'm gonna, gotta go. No reason.
Nothing's going big on, red flag there. Like, yes, where are
huge,
you going?
Enormous red flag. So I want to say that it's a little too obvious to be like he's gonna go tell the Parshendi stuff and whatever's gonna happen. But also, not gonna rule that out, definitely, just because it's more obvious or more alluded to.
Right.
I'm remembering back to a few chapters ago. I don't remember how many chapters ago it was now. Shen at one point, or Relane, or whatever his name is, tried to tell Kaladin something. He like pulled him aside at one point and was like, oh, hey, boss, I gotta tell you something. And then they get interrupted, and Shen never got to tell him what he was gonna say. And now here's like the final goodbye moment, and he doesn't share any information with him. He just says, I gotta leave and I can't tell you why. So now it's like, wait, you're leaving. You were gonna spill something important, and now you're not. Yeah, I'm super suspicious of Shen Relane at this point. I'm kind of thinking he's headed down the path of straight up Parshendi spy and he almost like turned himself in to Kaladin and then changed his mind, and now he's off to go report to the Parshendi. I'm afraid that's what's happening here.
That makes a whole lot of sense. I wanna play devil's advocate just because. Well, it's not just like I honestly feel like this is probably the case, or it could very well be the case. I think that Shen may have been touched enough, by Kaladin's leadership and example and giving him the spear and stuff that he's not, and we're supposed to think he's going to be a spy, but instead, I don't know, maybe he spies for the Alethi. I don't think that would ever happen, but just doing something, less bad, just something more chill, and maybe it'll come into play later. Um, but yeah, I don't think we'll know for a while, I guess. But I'm rooting for he's not a Parshendi spy. Definitely rooting for that.
Any other thoughts on 52?
Covered it.
53. Adolin wins himself a duel and gets himself another duel. That is less than ideal, but he still gets another duel. And he, in the eyes of everybody else, he cheats again, right? Where it's not an honorable duel, and I believe Eliot is who he's dueling, and I don't remember his cousin's name at the moment.
Relis.
Thank you. Relis is who he's trying to duel,
Right.
but Relis won't agree with it, so he duels Eliot instead. Beats Eliot. Relis comes in all storming mad and challenges him to a duel on the spot. Well, gets talked into a duel at a disadvantage, and that means that Adolin has to be numbers down when fighting. Any thoughts?
Yes, definitely. So I thought it was funny. So Adolin kind of does it because he's been advised to do something, miraculous or whatever, really make a show out of it.
Right.
And I want to say this was a step too far, maybe, because so he gets Relis to agree to the duel, but Relis can bring a friend, bring a buddy who's also a shard bearer, and that's it's a complete 2 versus 1. Seems like too much. We'll be honest, my biggest fear with this happening is that I don't know, maybe they make Adolin a little too good, because I feel like realistically, unless the shard bearers were really bad, really inexperienced or something, like Renarin level, maybe would lock up in a fight or something.
Right.
I'm kind of afraid they're going to make it be like, oh, Adolin just breezed through him or something. But I think it'll be a tough match, but I don't know what's going to happen. So I think that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid they're going to make Adolin too good at fighting with shards, with shard blades, I guess.
I think I'm worried coming out of this chapter at the fact that Adolin doesn't know who he's going to be dueling, right? I mean, up until this point, he's been picking his dueling opponent specifically, knowing that he can beat them. Well, now he's fighting against Relis, who sounds like he's going to be the toughest opponent he's faced yet, and some unknown other opponent. Leaving that undefined seems like a really bad idea. It seems like Adolin's just assuming, oh, he's going to bring, whoever his buddy is who's not going to be very good, and I'll take down Relis. He'll be the tough one, and the other guy will just be a piece of cake. But what if Relis finds someone else, crazy to come in and fight with him, and then, Adolin gets beat down? That's my worry here, that this would be completely insane. But what if Zyle comes out as the other shard bearer there, someone that just completely outclasses Adolin, what is he going to do? Like, just the fact that he doesn't know who this other person is going to be sounds really dangerous.
Definitely. And like, yeah, I agree. Like, he doesn't know who he's going to fight. And so they
Right.
can kind of prepare for him. And he's going
Exactly.
to have to go in pretty You can only prepare so much, I feel like, for 1 versus 2 fight. So, I don't know. He'll have his hands full for sure.
But on the other hand, any shards that are brought against him, he can win in the duel. So he's kind of doubling down here, where if Relis's buddy brings Shard Plate and Shard Blade, and he wins, he can get all 4. So
You're right. He can. That is true.
High risk, high reward, I guess.
Yeah, and by high risk, it's kind of
impossible.
A little bit of stupidity. By a little bit, I mean a lot.
Right.
So I don't know what he's gonna do there. Maybe he'll miraculously like get his own sprint and learn Surge Binding or something in the next week. That'd be sick.
Oh my.
That'd be a way to win, though.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
This duel's in 2 days.
Yeah, or a week, 2 days. It comes when you need it most, right? He'll say the words or something.
Do you think Shallan being right in front of him had any inspiration for this spur of the moment? His betrothed that's right there, like, I'll take both of you, like.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. He even like mentions, I think he did, either he did or Shallan did. He's like, how was that for extravagant or something like that? Or you definitely did something noteworthy. So
Right.
yeah, I think he's definitely trying to flex a little bit. He was puffing out his chest. Yeah, I could take two shard bears at once.
Any other thoughts about 53?
No thoughts.
54. We get a Shallan point of view chapter, who this book is about. We haven't had any of her in this week yet, but here we are. And we had the Amaram thing, but that was half Callum as well. Ghostblood meeting goes fairly well, or at least she thinks so, until they try to kill her at the end of the chapter, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's fine. She recreates what the room looks like for the Ghostbloods, but she pretends like she can't reproduce the glyphs on the walls and the maps and the names and stuff like that. But she can, but she pretends like she can't.
I think Shallan's getting in dangerous territory. And I think Shallan thinks Shallan is getting into dangerous territory here as well. She's revealing a lot about herself. And I think she's realizing that, like, in the moment of, she's letting loose enough details that if someone were to kind of do a compare of, oh, we've got this Veil character and we've got this new Shallan person that just showed up in town at the same time, they kind of have some similar skills here. I think her illusion ability is going to carry her for at least a while. I don't think, that seems so crazy and magical to this world that no one's going to, assume, oh, clearly she can disguise herself as other people. And that's going to take a while for people to figure out. But this is pretty big. The fact that she has this photographic memory that she does, letting the Ghostbloods learn that about her was probably not a great idea.
As she's reproducing the drawings for them, she's thinking to herself, there's 5 people in this tent that now know that I can reproduce their faces for anyone in the war camps. So that's probably not smart, and it isn't smart because one of them tries to kill her on the way back. But she is smart enough to know to take precaution there and avoids it.
She's also smart enough not to share all the information she knows with them. You mentioned this, Trevor. She reproduces the room, but not the text that she learned, and that I think was definitely smart. She needs to make sure that she doesn't play all her cards. She needs to make sure that she keeps some power in her own camp. So that was definitely a good move, I think.
And it's not necessarily that she's not trying to reveal all of her abilities, but she's also not trying to help the Ghostbloods. Because if she tells the Ghostbloods exactly what's in that room, she's actually just a part of the Ghostbloods at that, like, and helping them with what they're trying to do. So she can gain their trust, but she doesn't have to actually like actively help them with what they're trying to do.
The hiding in the rock part at the end is interesting in that she overhears a kind of confusing conversation between the lead guy Maraise and someone else that she doesn't like recognize maybe the voice of. And so we're only getting like part of the conversation, but a lot of little hints are dropped in that little conversation that she overhears that don't quite make a lot of sense to us, but I think are going to be important later on. So I'm bookmarking this little section so I can come back and read it again later. But Maraise mentions Thetacar. He mentions Restares. I don't know how to say that name. But isn't Thetacar one of the high princes or one of the... Have we had that name before?
We have had that name before, but it is not a high prince. You have heard it exactly once before.
Now I'm going to have to go research that.
Is he one of our knights read? No.
No,
Heralds?
he is not a herald.
Okay,
I can
think
tell
so,
you
but
where you've
still,
heard
I
it
guess I
before
have.
if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll have to go.
Yes. I will say yes to this. But if Elliot doesn't want to hear it, that's fine. We'll talk about it later or something. But
It's either have Trevor tell me now or as soon as we hit stop on the recording, go and research it. So go for it.
You've heard the name. I'm fairly confident you've only heard it once before. And Amaram mentions it as he's walking into the room with Kaladin. He mentions the name Thydekar and he mentions the name Ghostbloods.
Okay. So stuff to go in the notebook, I think, at this point of, I'm jotting this down of, remember this, it's going to be important, but it doesn't necessarily tell us a ton right now. He talks a little bit else about, not being worried about someone else and kind of the, they seem to be talking about like who the players are, who the movers and shakers are, and we're not quite sure who they're referencing, but I think this little section is going to be very important later on.
I can confirm it is important later on. I will say that.
So helpful.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you, Trevor. This is why we have you here.
Yep. No, I'm here to laugh at you. You're here to wonder.
Well, we did that part. We've been wondering.
Any other thoughts from the meeting with the Ghostbloods in Chapter 54, or any other thoughts on the episode?
I'm assuming that this is going to kind of set up for the Adolin duel, and I'm curious to see how that goes. I can't see him, like, dying or something, so maybe he just loses the duel and then the Colons are destitute, but...
Back up a couple episodes. You had a bold prediction that Adolin was going to die in a duel.
True.
So are you more or less confident?
I should stick with my previous self. He's probably smarter than I am, so... yes, Adolin's gonna die next whenever this duel happens.
In 2 days?
Yes, 2 days from now.
Okay.
Exactly. Unless he becomes a Knights Radiant.
Ah, yes.
That's this one. That's his hope.
Clearly.
The loophole.
Yes, exactly.
All right. We can close it off there. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot, and we will reconvene next week.
Alrighty.
Bye.